Hey guys, thanks for watching. This is going to be a how-to on finding Native American artifacts. Now, I've dropped tips throughout the years in different videos as I've hunted artifacts, but I don't think I've ever done a video where I kind of brought all that information all together. And that's what I want to do on this one, because I've been seeing some of your comments and some of you are saying, man, I've been looking for years and never found an artifact. Maybe these tips will help you narrow in your search and get you on that artifact you've been looking for. So you've got some studying to do. You need to understand who the Native Americans were that lived in your area, and the internet's a pretty valuable tool for that. Now, if you think you're going to go online and just find, locations posted about where to go hunt for arrowheads, you're going to be pretty disappointed. That sort of information just isn't published, and for good reason. But you can find out about the tribes that lived in your area. You can run across old some of the earlier settlers' writings, sometimes recorded in old books, about the rough location of villages. You also, and this is probably even more important, you're going to be able to find websites on the internet that show artifacts that come out of certain areas of the country. Really study the pictures of those artifacts, the material, look at the color, because you're going to be looking at that really shortly in the dirt. A local museum probably has an artifact collection. You could go look at that. And boy, if you happen to know an artifact hunter, they're always good guys to talk to. They're not going to necessarily put you on the exact spot. But most artifact hunters I know are pretty willing to show off some of the things that they found. One of the things that you're going to need is permission. And that's because artifact hunting on government land, national forests, state parks, guys, you don't want that sort of trouble in your life. So don't do it. It's not legal. But private land, you can hunt for artifacts. You can even dig for artifacts on private land. So unless you're a landowner that owns lots of land, you're going to need to get permission. Now this spot here is just a garden. And the way that I got this permission was through a friend that knew somebody. And the friend knew that I like to hunt for artifacts and kind of put in a good word for me. And I was off. But one thing that allows me to kind of come back, and you need to keep this in mind, it's kind of a nice thing to be able to share the artifacts, especially if the landowner has an appreciation for them as well. Now, this particular landowner has been collecting artifacts off this site for quite some time. And in some ways, I think it's good if there's an active collection from one particular location to try to keep the points all with one individual. So at this particular spot, now the little broke stuff I'm not that worried about, but some of the better points that I find, well, I give them to the landowner. Now, that probably doesn't sit well with all artifact collectors. I know a lot of guys are really passionate about their collections. And so it doesn't have to be this way. But I think that this probably helps to keep the door open and, makes people at least smile a little bit when you're out there, and instead of maybe growling, wondering why you're back out in their field day after day. It just keeps me coming back. It's something I'm willing to do. Maybe something you need to consider. But ultimately, you need to get permission. These guys that slip around and go to places they're not supposed to, I don't understand how in the world they do that. That would absolutely kill the whole experience for me. Do it the right way, you won't regret it. A bad location is going to do you just about as much good as no location. You're just not going to find artifacts in some places. So what makes a good location? How do you know what sort of permission to pursue? Well, for me, it boils down to water. What do all humans need to survive? Food, water, and shelter. And water's right there at the top of the list. And who wants to walk a mile to the nearest water source every day? Well, the Native Americans didn't, so they tended to have their villages and their camps pretty close to a water source. Every single artifact I have ever found in my entire life has been within 100 yards of a water source. It's that important. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't find them farther away than that, but by and large, you're going to have larger concentration of artifacts near water. For me, in these mountains, water sources are creeks and rivers. If your permission has a water source, if it has more than one water source, you might be in luck. Pay close attention to the confluence of two bodies of water. So if I have a permission that has a creek running into a river, really check that ground where those two bodies of water meet. Those tend to be good areas. Another good area would be a spring. Native Americans like cold, fresh water just as much as the rest of us, and artifacts tend to pop up around spring heads. Just keep in mind that over time, spring heads tend to move, and they're going to move uphill as the dirt erodes away. So be sure to not just check the area at the spring head, but to check the areas down below it. And that might be one of the few places that you'll ever see me actually in the water looking for artifacts. Now, that may not be the case where you're going to be hunting. In the mountains, when it rains, these creeks fill up with water and it becomes a raging torrent. And even the biggest of boulders is getting shifted and moved when the creeks get like that. And the artifacts, well, they're getting shifted down to the bottom. They're lost. But if I lived in a lowland area where the ground is relatively flat, when it rains real hard, you're probably looking at your creeks filling up and there being some flooding in the fields. As that water recedes, it does so much slower in flatland areas, and it brings a lot of silt, sediment, and artifacts to the creeks, to the lowest points. Look for rock bars if you have a sandy bottom creek. Look for places that rock is just naturally gathering, and you're probably going to find an artifact there. Look at this piece of quartz crystal. That reminds me of something else. When you're hunting the ground of your permission, keep your eyes open for things that are out of place. There is a lot of rock in this garden, but I'm looking for odd shapes, like this, triangle. Now, that could easily be a natural rock, but if I've kind of got my eyes attuned to looking for shapes like that, well, I'm going to stumble across an artifact eventually. Not all artifacts, though, are going to be arrowheads or blades. And this probably takes a little more studying. There are hammer stones, and you're about to see one in just a second. They're a little bit tougher to identify because many times these stones were picked up out of creeks. There wasn't a lot of work put into a lot of them. They were just a naturally formed, useful tool. And so how do you know whether an object like this is an artifact or not? Well, even though I'm within walking distance, very short distance from a creek, if you look, you don't see round stones in this garden. That stone came out of the creek, but it didn't walk up the hill to this garden. It was carried there. And it's out of place. It's unusual to see those polished stones up in this garden. So this is a tool, and you can see the on the end there where they were hammering away, and the end is a bit more degraded. And there's even a little bit of a pitted spot, kind of a worn spot in the middle of this rock. So be looking for things that are out of place. You're going to need open dirt on your permission. If your permission has all the check marks that we've already talked about, close to a water source, maybe at the confluence of two creeks, but it's waist-high grass, you're not going to find anything more than likely. This is good news for an artifact hunter. We're about to change locations. We're getting out of the garden, and I'm going to go to an old road bed that I have found artifacts in pretty routinely. This sort of rain right here. Oh man, does this make me happy. And it's something that's actually going to help in the garden site too, because as this water washes, it is moving dirt, and it's taking an old hunted out site and turning it into something brand new. Now, this little spot on this old road, I found it because I was looking for flaking. You're not going to normally just spot the artifact right off the bat, but you are going to spot a lot of this stuff. Flakes, very thin flakes of the material that you're to be looking for. Now that's actually an artifact. We'll get back to that in a second. But there's a bunch of it in this spot. So I always slow down here, and usually after a heavy rain like that, I know that I'm going to be running across something pretty cool. Check out that top right corner of the screen. There it is. I just haven't seen it yet. You got to really go slow while you're walking across this ground. These things are easy to miss. It's amazing to me how many times I've stepped right next to an artifact like this one in plain view and almost passed it by. And there it is, sitting there for thousands of years, just waiting to be discovered. All of these tips that I've given you, they come into play into finding this one artifact. Once you've found your spots, you've got them identified, guys, you're off to the races. So I hope these tips help. I'm going to cease my endless talking and just let you watch the rest of the video. You're going to see me walk up into the woods, which is not a typical place that I would hunt because of all the leaf litter. But I do know this one spot in the woods that has some bare spots, and I know that it's the right location. And you're going to see that even the littlest bare spot can produce a little artifact for you. Hope this helps. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching. No telling what turns up here. That's just a flake. All right. It's not a big area, but it produces. Now we got to find them others. There we go. There's one. Yep. Back of a point or a blade. That looks broken, so that was probably back of a big spear point. Always check them too. And that's more of a flake there. Alright, well, that's just the initial survey. I'm gonna go real slow. I'll let you know if I see something else. And guys, at a place like this, you hunt everything that can be hunted, and that means sometimes getting over in the woods, even though that seems very counterproductive because of all the leaves, there are bare spots. And you need to go really, really slow. I think I got one up here, and I have found them in these leaves before. You're just looking for color and shape. And in this place, I am looking for white. I'm looking for dark gray. I'm looking for oranges, yellows, reds. You see it? Yeah, it's just a broke. But it's a pretty one. Gotta check all these spots. Alright, that orange broke one was right there, and right here I think we got a little tool of some sort. Scraper, something like that. But I did see some more quartz poking through right here. Yeah, that's nothing, I don't believe. Although it does have a weird shape to it. Huh. Just nothing. Alright. Show you if you see anything else.